Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as the case may be, and welcome to our webcast on 4 use cases of AI in distribution. I'm your host, Jonathan Bine. Be joined in a moment by our distinguished expert and speaker, Benjamin Cohen. What we're going to be looking at is really where AI can be practically used in distribution today. And it's available and for use in a surprising number of functions of your business. So it's not just restricted to operations or to sales. We're going to see things across the entire enterprise that make sense. Before we get into the main content of our presentation, I wanted to, first of all, thank our sponsors without whom this presentation would not be possible. First sponsor is NetSuite. Oracle NetSuite has developed a cloud-based business management platform used by more than 29,000 fast-growing organizations across the globe. With a single integrated suite of applications for managing, accounting, order processing, inventory management, production, supply chain, and warehouse operations, NetSuite ERP gives companies clear visibility into their data and tighter control over their businesses. Visit www.netsuite.com to learn how you can make better financial decisions, gain inventory visibility, optimize your supply chain, and increase warehouse efficiency. I'd like to introduce our next sponsor, which is Optimizely and Becky Mowers from Optimizely.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. It's a pleasure talking to everybody again today. I know we've been on a few times. I am based in Minneapolis, and I'm here to talk a little bit about Optimizely in terms of B2B commerce. So where we really set ourselves apart is we are only focused on working with manufacturers and distributors. That's really our sweet spot, and we've been doing that for over 18 years. Our solution is purpose-built for the complexities of B2B, a lot of features and functionality out of the box. But at the end of the day, it's more than a website. You really want to drive proven business results to drive success for your business. Next slide, please. So as we all have experienced, like digital expectations are changing really fast for buyers. So you really want to make sure that your experience is easy, it's personal, it's seamless for your customers. So if I'm a returning customer, having like a welcome back message, or hey, here's an easy way to do a quick order without having to search for things that you order on a repeat basis. And then providing like relevant product and images. So if you segment your business, let's say you've got roofing contractors and siding contractors that buy from you. If I log in and I'm a roofing contractor, I should see content that's related to roofing. I shouldn't see siding, right? So you want to make that relevant, easy. And then again, you can see surprise me with things I didn't know I wanted, providing those real-time recommendations or upsell, cross-sell will help you increase your share of wallet as well. And then one more slide, Jonathan. And then working smarter these days doesn't mean automating your people away. It's giving your employees more focus to spend time on activities that improve, retention, grow your revenue, drive profitability, and guide them. And your e-commerce platform should support your business strategy, but not limit you. So again, be where your customers are looking. Are they online? Are they mobile? Are they coming, to your counter? You have a lot of data. You can segment your customers. So making that experience relevant and looking at analytics to make real-time decisions as well. And then connect. We connect to your ERP, your PIM, your CRM. There's a lot of opportunities to tie in data. And then again, making that experience customer driven. And digital self-service is a huge demand these days. People want to be able to come and find information, research, et cetera. So thank you for the opportunity, and probably passing it off to Ben.
Thank you, Becky. And I should also say we have seen really amazing results with Optimizely in different distributors that we've worked with. We recommended it into a couple places. So definitely good product and definitely worth checking out. I'd like to introduce my special guest today, Benjamin Cohen, CEO of proton.ai. Benj, how you doing?
Good. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Excited about this.
It's like too, Benj. And just for our audience, we've got a little bit of, the young whippersnapper, old geezer dynamic going on here. I'm going to be making some comments about, wow, back in my day, what AI was like. And, Benj is going to be bringing like what it's about today and how it's relevant and how you can get outsized benefit and return on what you're doing with AI. So I think before we do go into this, I just want to mention the recording will be available typically within 24, maybe 36 hours from the broadcast today. And we are open to questions. In fact, we love questions. We might make a game time decision about whether we're going to answer it then or whether we're going to wait till later to answer it. But there's a Q&A button, if that's for whatever reason not visible or invisible. Let's look at, you can send a question via the chat and we'll take that as well. Okay, Benj, take it away.
Awesome. Yeah. So super excited. Thanks so much for having me on today to talk about kind of AI and where it fits in distribution. So the plan for the day is we'll talk about what AI is and why it matters. And then Jonathan and I will go through 4 kind of AI applications that we've seen, opportunities for application of AI within distribution. The 4 buckets are in inventory, in product, operations, and sales. And so super excited to talk about that. And then at the end, we'll talk briefly about kind of how to get started and how to think about prioritizing across these different buckets. And so, yeah, with that, I want to talk a little bit about what AI is and why it matters. So I think and Jonathan, definitely jump in here.
Okay.
I think we all hear a lot about kind of how big of an impact AI is going to have. And I think part of that has to do with kind of the exponential nature of AI, which we'll talk about in a second, which is what really makes it different. But this is a technology that a lot of people that are much smarter than me think is going to have a huge impact on the economy, help with automation, help knowledge workers do their jobs better, sort of the industrial revolution over again with powered by sort of the increase in computing power that we've seen. And so this is from a McKinsey study a few years ago, looking at the sort of over a long time horizon. I think it's over 13 years, the impact of AI on the overall economy. And their forecast is that those businesses that adopt AI early are going to sort of the front runners are going to end up having 122% increase in cash flow over the 13-year period relative to followers who have a 10% gain and late adopters who they predict may lose 23%. So there's a huge relative difference in cash flows over this time period. And this is, economy wide, but this is something that's really important for us as distributors to think about from a technology perspective, because it's going to have huge implications in distribution and sort of in the economy more broadly.
Well, and I think if we look at the macro picture with all that's going on with supply chain, with labor availability, the impact of AI is even heightened in this environment. And we'll see that some of the applications or the use cases that we're looking at play into that directly. So
definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of really practical ways to make the technology make sense in distribution. So awesome. So I think before we kind of jump into those applications, want to get everyone kind of on the same page, thinking about how AI actually works, and then why it's important, why AI is kind of different than other technologies that we've seen. So, the quick explanation is first start with how humans learn things. Humans learn things, they see examples, they learn patterns from those examples, and then they apply those patterns. So, you're learning how to drive a car, you go out, you see a stop sign, turns out you should, hit the brake and stop there. You learn that as a pattern, and then you apply that the next time you see a pattern. AI learns in the same way. So if you go to the next slide, the AI learns in the same way, but basically just needs more examples. So AI, sees a bunch of different examples in data, learns patterns across that data, and then applies the patterns afterward. And so I think it's really helpful kind of to think about when you're trying to understand how this works, to actually look at an example. So imagine, if you flip to the next slide, imagine that you're trying to figure out what items go with set of items in a shopping cart. So these are items that you're about to buy on Amazon, and Amazon wants to figure out, what items go with these products. What job is someone trying to do? What are the missing products? So a human, and if you go to the next slide, might go sort of interview a bunch of customers who have bought those products and see what, ask them questions like, what are you trying to do? Why are you buying these products? Looking at a few examples of customers who have bought those items, and then use that to try to figure out what goes with the products the customer's buying. AI looks at this kind of from a totally different, a similar perspective, but different in that it's not going out and asking customers. Instead, if you go to the next slide, looking at a huge amount of data. So instead of interviewing a few customers and learning patterns across those customers, an AI model might look at all the transactions that Amazon has with those two items and seeing what people are buying with those items. And so that means that, it gives some advantage to AI in that it's really going to be very good at this specific task because it can look at more data than a human can look at. But the disadvantage is that it requires a lot more data.
So let's talk about what a lot more means, Benj. I mean, in the case of Amazon, it means millions or billions of instances, right? Of training patterns. Practically in other size businesses, what might that mean?
Yeah, so what's amazing about distribution is that we already have data that's big enough to make sense, to find patterns like this in, right? We have, years and years of transaction data, lots and lots of product data. So the amazing thing about distribution is all the data that we already have. And so in this human example, you're talking about, a couple of data points. Having 1,000 data points is more than enough data to do something interesting. And then distribution, we have way more than 1,000, way more than 1,000 examples of transactions, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Some of our customers have like billions of so there's huge data volumes that exist. So we are all well positioned to take advantage of this technology, which is cool.
Nice.
And so I think in my mind, and Jonathan, I'm definitely curious to get your take on this too. In my mind, the thing that makes AI interesting beyond just like, okay, yeah, we can learn some patterns and automate some things, is that its impact is exponential by design. So unlike, so this chart is showing you the number of users on the x-axis and the value that can come from an AI, from a system on the y-axis. So the traditional operating model is that graph that's a log, the gray line. And that's kind of what, the technology that we've seen in distribution, that's kind of how that technology operates. So you deploy a new website. The first few people on the website add a lot of value because they find all the bugs. Of course, if you deploy an Optimizely site, there are no bugs, but other than that, you might find some bugs with the first few customers. And then over time, the value to the incremental user goes down, right? So the 1,000th customer who goes on the site doesn't get more value from the 999th customer. Compare that to a system that's powered sort of by this digital operating model with AI at the core. As you add more users, the system gets smarter and is able to learn across all those users. And so adding an incremental user adds value to all the other users. And so the value of the system kind of goes up exponentially, which is like a really powerful idea and why it's important to start early with AI, and also why you see in the projection from McKinsey this sort of exponential growth. It's because of this effect where the incremental user adds value to everyone else who's using the system.
A related term that people might have heard is the network effect. And it's a similar idea here. It is an exponential effect. And as you see in the pink colored line, I mean, it's going up at a very sharp angle. And that's what exponential means. We'll be talking about exponential in a couple of other parts here of our webcast today.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think this is a really important idea. And so just to kind of draw this point out just a little bit more, I tried to make this graphic to sort of explain this concept. So the dark boxes on the top are kind of that traditional operating model. the first few users are adding a lot of value, but then by the time you get to many users, those additional users that you're adding are adding a tiny amount of value. So the overall system's value to the next user doesn't really increase much as you add more people. But if you compare that to sort of the digital or the AI powered operating model, as you add more users, the value of each incremental user to the next user goes up. And so that means that there's this sort of exponential effect that happens, which is really, really powerful. So yeah, I think that's a really important idea to understand.
So when we look at the different types of problems that AI solves, at least that we're going to look at today, there are more. We're going to look at really three categories of problems that are solved. All of them are using machine learning at some level, by the way. So you might have heard the term ML or machine learning. All of these are relying heavily on different types of machine learning to be effective. So there are predictive or classification models that we're going to be looking at. I think actually what Benj is going to be describing in his part on sales and product is going to be more on the predictive or classification types of things. We're also going to be looking at stuff in the warehouse and inventory that involves automation using sensing and robotics. And that technology has made major leaps forward over the last 5 or 10 years. I was just realizing I went to, some of you may use Clear at the airport, which gives you faster access through the lines. And during COVID, I had my face mask on, and I wasn't standing perfectly still. And it was able to look at my eyes and figure out who I was. That was both comforting and terrifying at the same time. That's part of the kind of advances that we're seeing in sensing, whether it's vision or tactile sensing being used with robotics. And then the third broad category, which we're going to touch on just briefly, is what's known as optimization. We're close to Father's Day, so I'm not going to make a dad joke, at least not yet. But here's a scenario that might happen on Father's Day that will help you understand what optimization is about and what exponential is about. We've all had the experience of packing a trunk, right? And if we have to put 1 or 2 items in the trunk, it's a really easy problem. But if we have to put more items, the problem goes up exponentially. You may remember the term factorial. So if I have to put 3 items in the trunk and I want to do it perfectly, meaning use the least amount of space possible, there's 6 different ways I can do 3 items. When I get to 4 items, there's 24 ways I can do it. When I get to 5, there's 120. When I get to 10, there's 3.6 million. So just going from 5 to 10, I went from 120 to 3.6 million, right? None of us have time to investigate all 3.6 million ways of packing the trunk to find which is the best way of packing the trunk. This is the kind of thing that AI learning can do, using the power of computation to solve these problems. By the way, there might be another overlay, beyond I just want to use the least amount of space. If we're thinking about the Father's Day weekend, I might want to have the cooler accessible, right? So there's another constraint that I have on the problem. So these are the kind of problems that we're gonna see. And an example in distribution is cartonization, right? Cartonization is essentially identical to the pack the trunk for the weekend getaway. I think a broad comment, and this is the Geezer comment. I was calculating how much more compute power we have now, Benj, than when I started working 40 years ago, and we literally have 64 million times compute power than when I was getting going in 1982 doing symbolic AI. So the things that we can do now, we would dream of doing back then, but they're becoming very real today.
And that I think is a really important point, because if you went back, AI has been like a topic for a long time.
Yeah.
That what you just said is the reason why it's relevant today. Is because you can actually do stuff with the technology today in a way that you could not.
It was at the height of the hype cycle about 3 to 4 years into my career, and then it hit a long-term trough of disillusionment until it started to come back really behind the scenes after about 2000. So
right. Yep. Awesome. So yeah, we'll talk about these 4 applications of AI and distribution. The 4 that we'll talk about as a reminder are inventory, operations, product, and sales. And so with that, I think we should just jump right in and talk about inventory.
Sounds great. So one of the things that we've all noticed that's a problem even more during COVID is the supply chain and supply chain resiliency. And historically, we've all been, as distributors, we've all been working with lead time from the supplier that we use to make planning around. But it turns out that there are significant errors in the estimate of when you actually get things versus the expectation that suppliers set with you, the expected date of delivery. The negative impact to the business is you have to get this perfect balance. If you spent tons in working capital, you could get service levels to a great level and delight your customers, but you'd be tying up too much in working capital. If you don't have enough inventory, well, great. You're going to be great on diminishing the amount of working capital, but you're not going to have sufficient service levels for your customers, and you're going to have problems there. So getting a better estimate than what the supplier is giving you is of great value to distributors. Turns out that using AI and machine learning techniques, you can reduce this error by about 30 to 60%. And I've seen this number in different places. I've actually seen it in work that we've done. I've seen it replicated in publications that I've read. So if you're getting a 4-week estimate from the supplier, you can reduce whatever error is inherent in that 4-week estimate by 30 to 60%. And it might be that it should be a 5.5-week estimate. It might be that it should be a 2.5-week estimate. The kinds of things that you can take into account to do this are obviously the supplier estimate and historical data. You can look at the supplier. You can look at things about the product, either the category that it's in or the SKU. You can look at where it's coming from. And, a lot of people are pointing supply chain problems to China, but it might not just be China. It might be, hey, it's coming from a long distance. And, when we look at that pattern of history, we see, there's going to be a delay there. And then obviously you can look at seasonal things. There are other approaches that people are taking to this. What I would say is that this is a very, very high value application. And if you're able to get that error reduction in that 30 to 60% range, you can reduce working capital and still maintain service levels. You can reduce working capital by about 10%. That's a really, really significant number for a distributor of any scale. So this is not yet available from ERP vendors. I don't think it's available from even other third-party software. At least I'm not aware of it yet. But it is something that could be built by you without a huge amount of effort and getting great value.
And this is something, just as a call out on the sort of build versus buy question, which I think comes up a lot. This is a great first project. Like, you hire a data scientist and you're wondering, like, how do I make use of it? Like, what is a good project that has a high ROI? This is it. This is a great one, because the techniques you need to do this it's not a rocket science project.
Right. I think that's a great call out, Benj. This is a great first project to be starting internally if you're starting to build that kind of a capability.
Right. Exactly.
The whole area of AMRs is also another. I'm going to make a geezer comment. When I was back at Martin Marietta in 1982, I was among the first 6 AI people in Colorado in 1982, and we were doing early AI at that time. And just so you understand the level of what we were trying to do, it was robotic stuff. It was machine vision stuff. The machine vision was looking at a set of pixels. It could be 1 million pixels that you're getting in an image, and trying to figure out where is a line, where is an edge in this. That's the level of what things were at in 1982 to 1984, which is very different than the example I described going to Clear at the airport, where they're able to figure out who I am just looking at my eyes, even though I'm not perfectly still. So AMRs have really taken off. First of all, I want to say there's a big difference in how AMRs are used in a manufacturing setting versus a distribution setting. In manufacturing settings, you get much more repetitive tasks. In distribution settings, they could be going anywhere in the warehouse, depending on whether they're doing something relating to picking. By the way, most of them are not, but if they are, they might be needing to pick different types of things. So AMRs use sensors and machine vision to navigate the space and to do their task without a predefined route or instruction. And that's what really distinguishes AMR in your distribution warehouse or distribution center from manufacturing AMRs. And what they can do is they can dynamically get from point A to point B. Sometimes that's going to mean they need to stop to make way for another AMR or person or trailer of some kind. And what they're doing is they're using some kind of sensing and 3D vision and learning. And that learning benefits the other AMRs. So that's part of that network effect or that exponential piece that Benj was talking about. There are a number of different applications of AMRs. So some of them are, it's a voice pick operated thing where the human's doing the picking, they're putting it on the AMR is getting enough things on it and then going back to where things can be packed. Sometimes the AMR is used in conjunction with or in lieu of a conveyor belt. And one thing that's really impressive is the load capacity that these are getting to, and these are increasing very rapidly. At the small end, you're typically going to need something that has at least a 80 or 100 pound capacity. But at the high end, where you're stacking things on top of the AMRs, they can get over to well more than a ton and is going up as we speak. So let's look at some of the AMRs that are pretty interesting. The one on the lower left is actually from Amazon, and they talk about P to G, what's known as people to goods. So instead of you going to a zone or being in a zone and picking something from a shelf, they actually bring the shelf to you, right? That's what it's when they mean people to goods. So the person is stationary. As you can see, it's more than a single tote there. I mean, it's a 14-foot stack or shelf of things that is in that lower left example. So you might have heard the expression, if you can't bring Muhammad to the mountain, bring the mountain to Muhammad. This is the case of bringing the mountain to Muhammad. And it came about in the story of, hey, people are spending a lot of time walking around the Amazon warehouses, and so this is what they derived. Another example that's related to picking is this up-and-coming thing, Squid, which is in the upper left, where they are essentially they're retrofitting a warehouse with tracks, and this thing goes up on your shelf, and it goes over to the right place, and it actually picks things out and brings them back and does the right thing with them. So definitely, this stuff is happening right now and is definitely good to go. I mentioned briefly another one, voice picking. A number of you may be using this, but this is just another example where AI is used. It's used in two different ways here. It's AI generated speech, which we've all experienced getting better over a 10 or 15 year period. And it's also using AI voice recognition for the human to complete saying, I've completed the pick. So this is a great example where you're getting a huge increase in productivity, 30 to 50%, much more accurate. Same thing, by the way, with the AMRs. You're seeing people getting to 250 lines picked, which is really about the peak of what a human can be involved in. So these are really significant productivity boosts, accuracy boosts, and are going to increase safety as well. So just briefly, we've looked at 3 inventory examples: supplier lead time, autonomous mobile robots, and voice picking. The predicted supplier lead time we mentioned is early. The other 2 are ready to adopt, and I would even say the voice picking is starting to get mature.
Definitely, yeah. So the 3, we want to talk about some examples where you can use AI in product. Jonathan, for some reason
I need to do this. Please.
Oh, continue. Got it. Cool. So on the product side, the first example is image search. And so this is something you've seen coming from Grainger. Home Depot has image search, and a few other companies are starting to launch it. It's typically coming from places like the technology to actually do the image search is starting to become more commoditized. Like Google Cloud offers it, Amazon Web Services offers it, Azure offers it, but actually getting it right in distribution is really difficult. And I think we're going to see in this area, I think we're really on the early side of actually getting this to work really well. So in this example, you can see that, the image search is correctly identifying that that's a hand cover or a head cover, but actually knowing exactly what product it is really challenging because we just don't have that much image data in distribution today. So I think you're going to start to see what we're seeing over time. You'll see things like what we're seeing in autonomous vehicles, where there'll be companies that are actually making synthetic data to help train these image recognition models. But right now, what we've seen in terms of use cases for this technology, it's actually interesting. When you talk to folks who are deploying it, they tell you that the use case of a customer using their phone to scan and search for an item, people use it a lot because they think it's cool. But really where they've seen value from the technology is actually internally, with sales reps going out and scanning in their customers' facilities to figure out what products they're buying from a competitor and helping to identify the version of that product that they have in their catalog that they can sell. And they're also using the technology to help kind of map plants and things like that. So there's a lot of really interesting use cases here. It's pretty early. And I think a lot of the underlying technology is actually going to come from cloud vendors combined with this sort of synthetic data, which I think you'll start to see more of.
It's interesting that you mentioned that the internal user is the power user. This is analogous to what we've seen in e-commerce. Now end customers are using the e-commerce sites more, but for a long time, the power user was the internal customer service rep who needed to get data about a product, and they used their own website to do that. So,
right. Yeah. And I think that's like an unsurprising pattern of adoption, because this stuff it's not quite where it needs to be, where you can just point and click and get the SKU, with one picture. The second example using product data and AI is really around search. And we've seen this over and over again with the customers that we work with. As distributors, we sell huge catalogs of products. It's really hard to find what you're looking for as a sales rep. And so this technology is much more advanced and ready to go. This is just an example. The picture here is from Elastic. They're a vendor that sells a lot of robust search capabilities. But where we've seen this really be valuable in distribution is a few places. So obviously on websites, there's companies like Bloomreach, Algolia that help with sort of AI-powered search, making it easier for customers to find products they're looking for, doing basic things like correcting misspellings, but more sophisticated things like if someone types in, blue apron, but you have it in your system as a purple apron, blue and purple are like pretty similar. And so we should return the purple apron as a result. That's actually a pretty hard problem. But there are a lot of companies out there that are solving it really well. And the other place where we've seen this technology be really effective is actually searching through sell sheets. So this is an application that we see in our product too. Basically, you can load in all of your sell sheets, documents about products, et cetera, and actually give reps an easy way to search them. It sounds simple, but from what we've seen, it's really hard to find information about products, and making it easier to do that search internally is a great application for AI today in distribution. And then the final example is pretty interesting. So it's basically around sort of product categorization and making sense of product data. So there's this company, Backbone AI, and there are a couple others out there that are using sort of AI to understand product catalogs and help harmonize them across different distributors and manufacturers. So I think sort of the big idea behind Backbone is, it's hard to kind of make sense of all these incoming data streams from all the different manufacturers that we work with as distributors. How do we make sense of it? How do we map it to the data that we already have in our system when things change? And so they're actually using AI to kind of automate that normalization process. The same technology can be used to help with product categorization, using the product metadata to actually figure out, are products in the right categories? Do we have the right information about those products? Where are the gaps? So helping distributors kind of better manage and optimize their product data, which I think is going to is already, and this is not a controversial take, but I think that being really good at managing products is a key way to differentiate from an Amazon, because they are not as good, and they will not have as good an experience as the best distributors on the merchandising side for the products that we sell in our markets. And so I think technology like this that understands products and is able to kind of understand the relationships between products and categorize them and kind of know where the gaps are a really powerful way for distributors to compete against big box companies like Amazon.
Yeah, and I think the heat in the kitchen the temperature in the kitchen is going to go up quite a bit over the next few years on product data. Historically, you look at it, you can look at it in terms of what is my price per SKU or my cost per SKU to get decent product data for my website and in the old days, my catalog. Yep. Well, with the product data getting much wider and much deeper, and demands from customers to have much more current product data, this category of AI to help with your product data is going to deliver huge value in the near future.
No question. And I think this is where a lot of when we talk to really big distributors, they're very focused in this area because they see this as the way to compete with Amazon and Home Depot. So just to quickly summarize the kind of examples we talked about, we didn't talk much about voice search, but that's there. So there's sort of the find the right product piece, which is search by image, search by voice. That technology is exciting, but early. Semantic search for products and spec sheets, that's ready to adopt today, helping people quickly find what they're looking for. And then this sort of like product categorization, product normalization is really interesting use case. And also there are vendors out there today that make it easy to adopt the technology.
Good. So we're going to shift now to where AI is playing a role in distribution operations. We're going to look at a few examples here. First category is what's known as cashierless checkout. And I'm showing you a consumer example here. I'm going to shift to a video from Amazon Go. Okay, so this is Amazon Go. So what Amazon Go is a sort of high-end convenience store that doesn't have a cashier. And when you go to Amazon Go, you use your Prime card to identify yourself. And let's just see how the rest of this plays out. And then we'll talk about where this is going to have an application in distribution.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store, so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and start shopping. It's really that simple. Take whatever you like. Anything you pick up is automatically added to your virtual cart. If you change your mind about that cupcake, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart automatically. So how does it work? We used computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion, much like you'd find in self-driving cars. We call it Just Walk Out technology. Once you've got everything you want, you can just go. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual cart and charges your Amazon account. Your receipt is sent straight to the app, and you can keep going. Amazon Go. No lines, no checkout. No, seriously.
Okay, so you get the idea with Amazon Go. It's pretty amazing technology. It talked about the use of automation, pattern recognition, AI to detect what people are buying. By the way, I would have done the same as the woman. I would have bought that cupcake after all. I was on her page. So think about where this applies in a distribution branch setting. as we know, if you're going to the branch as a customer, you want to get in and out as quickly as possible. So if you're going to will call, you want to get in and out of will call as quickly as possible. Where this would apply is really anything potentially besides will call. So if somebody's doing an impulse buy, if somebody had planned to buy something but it wasn't will call, they come into the store, and you've got a countably finite set of things that you're merchandising. This could save somebody 5 to 6 or 7 minutes. And if you are somebody who's got a habit of going to the branch, let's say you're on a construction project, you go to the branch 3 times a week and you save 4 or 5 minutes each time you go there. That is a big win for the customer. Frees up people to do higher value functions. So this one is a little further out right now, but it is going to be available at some point. Somebody's going to figure out how to generalize this and make it available. The next is delivery drones, also a little bit far out right now, but making rapid progress in certain cases. There have been a number of experimental things, Alphabet Wing, which is part of Google, Amazon, Prime Air, FedEx, they're all in the trial phase. DHL had what they called a parcel copter, which had a range of 40 miles, could go 75 miles an hour, could carry a 9-pound capacity. That was actually abandoned. So not all of these initiatives have gone well. One that is really notable is Walmart, and they are able to serve a metro area with a 10-pound package. They're in a rollout to 34 cities. So if you look at these trials, most of the trials of using the drone technology are in tier 3 cities, Raleigh, Durham, smaller cities, 100,000 people. But Walmart is getting to the point where they're rolling it out to 34 cities, and it's going to be available to literally millions of people. So different levels of maturity here. Let's also look at the related piece, which is the autonomous vehicles and delivery robots. We're going to see, in fact, I think we are already starting to see, you might have noticed some of these in different locales, these both vehicles and delivery robots. The delivery robots are really more like the 2 images on the left. So the one here with FedEx, the one from Amazon Prime. And they're taking a small payload, could be 10 pounds, definitely consumer items. Also, as we know, consumer leads what happens with distribution. So if it's happening in the consumer and the retail world, it will eventually make it to the distribution world. The FedEx one is actually pretty amazing. So it can go upstairs. The Amazon Prime one shows up at a flat surface. You get a notification it's there. There's an app on your phone. You can go get the thing out of the bot in a secure way that makes sure that nobody else can pilfer it along the way. But the FedEx one can actually go upstairs. So it's quite impressive. The company behind both this example here with FedEx and this bigger example that can carry a 300-pound payload is a company called Neuro. And they're valued, it's a private company, but they're valued at about 8.6 billion. They're rolling out things that are going through different retail companies such as Domino's, Kroger, FedEx. I'm trying to think of the others. So they are partnering, I think maybe Walgreens is one. They're partnering with retail companies that want to bring this technology forward. As you start to think about autonomous vehicles and delivery robots, there will emerge providers who do this as a third-party provider. So if we go back to the prior slide, we have FedEx as a logistics provider that's offering this type of a solution. You have Amazon Prime Air. Amazon's a retailer, a logistics player, and a technology company. They're all 3, but Alphabet is also, that's a technology company. So they're going to be companies that can provide these services for you. This is going to be happening in a narrow term range. We're going to start to see an acceleration of this over the next 3 to 4 years. A final piece that's also very relevant on the operations side is what's known as route planning and optimization. We have all experienced as consumers the thing where you're using Waze, you're using Google or equivalent, and it's rerouting you in real time based on what it knows. And those things work superbly. But the bigger problem, or a bigger problem, is the planning as well as the route optimization. And this type of optimization solution has been in place in various guises for 15 to 20 years, using techniques that are AI-ish, AI-related. You might have heard the term linear programming, optimization. So they're taking into account a lot of different things, and they can handle these cases where you have 1,000 trucks, and they're taking into account, a variety of factors: distance, drive time, traffic patterns. They're taking into account all of these things in the planning and calculating this in minutes. Suffice it to say, the case of 1,000 factorial, I gave you 10 factorial was 3.6 million. 1,000 factorial, I mean, that might be more than the number of atoms in the universe, right? I mean, it's
Huge.
It's just an incomprehensibly large number to think about. So the fact that AI can cut through this in minutes is a really amazing thing. Outcomes, you minimize lost time, you get better delivery times, you increase safety, and at the end of the day, all of this adds up to more money for you. So quick summary of the operations applications. The cashierless checkout is early. There's not yet a provider on the horizon who's offering this. Maybe Amazon will offer this to others. Truck route optimization, there are numerous companies that do this type of optimization. It's a classic operations research AI solution. And then we talked about where the autonomous vehicles and drones are. The autonomous vehicles are we're going to see in an earlier time frame. Back to you, Benj, on sales.
Yeah, so just one comment on the route optimization thing. I think there's a value there also for sales, where you can use the same technology to help route reps to visit customers. So anyways, yeah, back to sales. So sales, there's a ton of different applications. Here, my favorite personally is cross-sell, upsell. So using AI to figure out what each customer needs and when, and helping reps upsell and cross-sell those products, and then doing the same thing on e-commerce. So personalizing the experience there. So examples of that concretely for distributors, this is just a screenshot from our application, but you can see kind of highlighted in the middle, identifying things like wallet share gaps. Hey, this customer should be buying more in this specific category than they are because other similar customers are buying that. So that's a great opportunity to cross-sell into that customer. Another example is reorder. Hey, what should this customer be buying again that they typically buy at this time to make sure you don't lose that purchase? Other examples of sort of this cross-sell, upsell use case would be finding frequently bought with items that go, items that go together, or finding substitute items is another great example. So there's tons of applications for this in distribution, and it comes from the fact that we sell massive catalogs. And this stuff can have a real revenue impact. We typically see, upwards of, 6 to 12% increase in revenue from using this. So big impact there. So that's the cross-sell, upsell example. The next example is order entry automation. So this is a screenshot from Data Extreme's application. They're using some really sophisticated OCR and then actually search to basically take purchase orders, read what is in the purchase order, translate that into text, and then search against a catalog to find the item in that catalog that matches that product. Super impressive use case. Connexium is another example of a company that does the same thing. This is really powerful for actually freeing sales reps up from actually having to key these orders themselves. And that gives them more time to spend on things like selling, which is what the cross-sell, upsell application is all about. So this is another example of something that's ready to adopt, very powerful. We've heard about a lot of distributors using this and having a lot of success with it. The next example is pricing optimization. So this is a screenshot from Zilliant. There are a number of vendors out there that do pricing optimization using AI. Pros is another example. Vendavo is another one. But basically, they're taking in all the data they've got about your customers and what you're charging them, and figuring out what the optimal price for a specific customer at a specific quantity is. And this is a huge margin uplift opportunity for distributors. and a great use case for AI.
So Benj, if you know the answer, can you say exactly where the AI is being used in pricing, let's say relative to other non-AI based pricing systems?
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with exactly how these pricing systems kind of work under the hood. But my guess is that there's sort of a non-AI approach where you could basically just do a query against the data to say, what's the average price you're selling to this particular customer? And then what's the average price you're selling this item to some set of customers? And then this customer is below the average, so we're going to recommend that. If you're doing this in a more sophisticated way, which my understanding is that the Zillion and Pros of the world are doing, is they're using AI to try to estimate more of the demand within a specific customer. So in the same way that you're using AI to know, hey, this customer should be buying these products from you, you can do the same type of prediction with pricing to say, how badly does this customer want this product, as a way to kind of estimate kind of that individual customer's elasticity, instead of thinking about elasticity on a segment level or a full customer wide level.
Brilliant.
The other thing I've heard about pricing, just from talking to customers who have used it, is that they've seen the most impact when they deploy this on their long tail items. So really where distributors have the opportunity here, the items they're selling every day all the time, yes, there's an opportunity there, but the biggest opportunity is the item the sales rep doesn't really know how to price, doesn't really intuitively understand the elasticity for. That's really where there's a lot of gains here.
Terrific. Okay, day's short, the work is long. Let's keep moving.
Yep, sounds good. So 3 applications here in sales: cross-sell, upsell, both for reps and on digital channels, increase sales, increase loyalty, increase margin. My personal, what I think is the most exciting application, but I'm biased, that's definitely ready to adopt. Order entry automation, also a great opportunity, ready to adopt, especially when it's hard to find talent. And then optimizing prices, been around for a while, certainly an opportunity there, both increase sales and most importantly, increase margin, also sort of ready to go.
Terrific. We're going to move to a wrap-up slide, and then we have a question that we're going to answer. So let's talk about how to get started. I think there's a really interesting piece here, which is it's less about how do I do something with AI, and it's more about how do I do things that are where technology is providing high value, fast and predictable return, getting me to break even quickly. Historically, we used to look at technology payback cycles measured in years or quarters. And now we're starting to see with some of these AI technologies, AI technology applications, that you're getting payback within months, and it's a radical shift in the time frame for the horizon of AI. Benj and I are firmly aligned. Really look for where the value is. I mean, we showed you that there's things across multiple parts of your business. By the way, there are a bunch that didn't make the list because we didn't have time. I mean, we could go on for another 2 or 3 hours on where the application stuff are, right?
No question. Yeah. No, I think what you're saying is exactly right. You have to find an application where you can get an ROI and show that to the rest of the business. Yeah. Whether that's in sales, operations, order entry, whatever it is, it's got to be about the ROI. And take today as a menu of options of places to start. But yeah, I totally agree with you.
You want to continue with the summary?
Yeah, definitely. So just as a quick summary of what we talked about today, talked about why AI matters, and the reason that it matters is the sort of exponential nature of the technology and sort of the ability to create impact at scale. We talked about what AI is and kind of how it learns. We talked about 4 AI applications for distributors: inventory, operations, product, and sales. And all 4 have technologies that are ready to adopt or very close to being ready to adopt. And really it's about figuring out where the highest ROI opportunity is within your organization to kind of start experimenting.
Yeah, so it should be business case driven. We have a great question here from one of our frequent members of the audience. Is there a cross-reference AI for customer quotations, tool crib crosses, etc.? If you get that question, entirely great. If not, talk about AI for customer quotations.
Yeah, no, I get the question. It's one that comes up actually fairly often. So just so in case I think I understand the question. Basically, someone calls in or wants to quote something, and they tell you the way that they categorize or talk about that product, and you need to map it to your, like, a cross-reference to your catalog. Or they call in about a manufacturer you don't sell, and you need to cross-reference it to a manufacturer that you do sell. I think that's a really challenging problem, especially because you don't have the data necessarily to do that cross-reference. And so we've seen customers solve that manually. So they say, like, hey, we're going to have like a hard-coded set of cross-references that we get from the manufacturers. And so that's an opportunity to go back to manufacturers and demand more data to help you do better selling. You can use AI to better search that, set of cross-references. And that's really where the opportunity is that we've seen. So it's less in knowing what the cross-reference is as it is helping the rep easily figure out what the cross-reference is once you have the data.
Fantastic. Benj, we're really honored to have you as our special guest. You've done you've accomplished an amazing amount of things, particularly in the technology application of AI to distribution at a tender age. So thank you so much for participating with us. Thank you, audience. Again, we'll be sending out the recording link within 24, maybe 36 hours, and definitely follow up with us for questions. We've got a couple more things coming up here next week. Our wholesale change show, which is more of a talk show. We've got very, very senior person at Win Supply who's looking at it, how you create entrepreneurism with 600 subsidiary companies. I mean, it's absolutely amazing story, brought to you by Epicor. And then 2 weeks from yesterday, we've got how great distributors use marketing to dominate, featuring my incredibly distinguished colleague, Ian Heller, who's been VP of Marketing at 4 public distributors. That is sponsored by HMI Performance Incentives, Optimizely, and Connexium. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. We look forward to seeing you in future webcasts. Thank you, Benj.
Thanks so much for having me.